Welcome back to your Pixlr screencasts. We finished going through all the file menus and talked about your introduction to how everything works. And now we're going to get right into how all of the things on your toolbar work. First of all, the thing that I'd like to point out about the toolbar is that you can change how the buttons look. So you've got your black and white, you've got your stylized version. I prefer the original that it comes in, which is this, so we're just going to go ahead with that. Your toolbar is going to be the thing that you're going to use the most. It replaces a lot of actions that you could find in the menus that I laid out for you in previous screencasts. And it does a lot of different things. We're going to try to do as many as we can fit into a decent amount of time without making the videos too big and without making the videos too expansive so you're hunting around for how a tool works. Let's start off with crop. Crop is a great tool that people use usually right after they import a picture just to see like, oh, okay, well, I only need this part. Now you'll notice that I seem to be constrained to how I can make my crop right now. It's like going in this proportional way. Well, that's because if you look up above, you'll see that the constraint is on to aspect ratio and that the width and height was set to 1:1. This looks more like to me, looks more like a 9:16 photo. So what I'm going to do is change the width and height to 6 by, oh Lord, drop my mouse. The batteries came out. Stay tuned while we fix all of that stuff. I could just edit this out of the screencast, but I think it's funny. I'm going to leave it in. 6 by 9. Okay, so now if we go to do, you'll see that it's a lot more suitable to, now I guessed, so I'm not exactly on target, but that's a lot more suitable to how that works. But what we want to do here also is show you that you can change over here to no restriction, and that's more of a free form crop that you're going to be using. And that's basically how the crop tool works. Once you make it, you can then adjust. You can then adjust the crop how you want. You cannot change between how it's constrained or not after you've already done it. It'll ask you to apply the changes. But if you do that, you'll see it gets cropped. Okay, so that's basically how the crop tool works. The other tool you're going to be using a lot is the move tool. Okay, once you have a piece of something that is manipulated, that'll allow you to move it around. In this case, it's the main picture. So watch what happens as I move it around. The entire picture moves, and behind it, the gray and white, that represents transparency. So for instance, if I were to move this photo, I could then just kind of like say, oh, my head's here, and then I'm just going to do something silly like draw like a random speech bubble here and say, hi. So when this gets printed out, especially if I save as a PNG, you'll be able to move this picture over anything you want with no white over here and no white over here if it's saved as a PNG. And that's, you know, why it might be useful to move something with the move tool from the beginning of your photo. But that is if you have it like, you know, at the beginning of your photo. Obviously, if you copy and paste something, you can then use the move tool, which is V, by the way. Use keyboard shortcuts whenever possible, and that'll move away. You move around just the thing that you copy and pasted, the layer that you're up to, so on and so forth. But I'm going to undo that. So we just saw the move tool and we saw the crop tool. Also, one thing you should know is if you're on the move tool, the keyboard arrow keys work the same way as using your mouse. So that is a thing as well. I'm going to go back to regular image here. Move it back to where it was supposed to be, and good. So anyway, that's the point of, that's the crop and the move tool. Marquee tool allows you to select things that you want. Notice how the general marquee, the default marquee is to do a square. Okay, and look how it's free form and I can do whatever I want. If I hold down the shift key, now it becomes constrained to a proportion, and that's the only, it'll move in a much smoother way than before. So the other part is, let's say you made a square and you want to add something else. If you hold down the shift key here and add this, look what happens. Now it added more to it. You can add, in case you did it wrong, you can add more as you go along, and then you will see that that becomes the piece that you now have. Okay, so this is, you know, this is a very important thing to keep in mind. Also note that if you're like, oh no, I don't want this bounding box anymore, quick Control D or Edit Deselect will get you rid of that marquee tool. I'd like to point out the alternative menu options you have up here with your marquee tool to select any part of the photo. You could use an elliptical marquee, so it's like, oh, I just want the head here. I'm going to cut out the head and paste it as its own layer. So now there you go. I just did Control X, Control V, and made a new layer of just my head so that then I could move it around as much as I wanted. And I press V to switch to the Move tool. I'm going to undo all of that, of course. So, and then press Control D to deselect again and go back to our Marquee tool. Again, you can set your height and width here if you wanted to make the constraint just like you could with the crop box, but I almost never find myself doing that with the Marquee tool. And then that's basically, I think, you know what we're going to throw in? We're going to throw in a couple of other quick buttons here that are not going to be useful to go in order with, that we can just get out of the way. Pencil tool is a very thin kind of drawing on your picture. Kind of could make like a stubble mustache type of thing. But see how it's doing there? Why is it doing it that way? It's because the setting up here is sketchy. If you did plain, it would just be a line, right? You would just sort of have a line of a pencil tool. If you switch it over to trail, you end up getting this kind of cool whatever. It's like a cool way to be like all artsy fartsy with what you're doing, is just go to the pencil tool and try out different ways of drawing on something. Sorry, I meant to go here. You know, every time you do something, it'll do something different. And it's a lot of fun to mess around with. So, and the longer you hold it in a certain place, the darker the line gets. Like if I just go like this, it's very thin. If I go slower, it gets a little thicker. So if you see, that's how all that stuff works. And that is the pencil tool. The brush tool is going to be what you, again, just kind of, that's more markering it up. You could change the color down here, set the main color. You can use the eyedropper tool to choose like a color that matches, or you can select your own from wherever you want. Or if you know the exact RGB value, you can do that as well. You can also set the brush size right here. So if you want just a tiny little brush, whee, you know, then that's where you do that. The opacity is going to be how filled in it is. So notice how if I do the brush at 40 opacity, look how much lighter it is. So you could still see things under what I'm brushing over, as opposed to before where the opacity was 100, it completely colors over what was there before. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind, is your opacity can be set as well. So that's basically the functions you're going to be using for the brush tool and the pencil tool. As you can see, the same thing about size and opacity applies there as well. And we're going to kind of stop the screencast here. You know what, actually, let's do the type tool. You can do letters, right? And all your options are here. Colors that you want, style, centered, the font, all over here. You can then go ahead and delete that by right-clicking and deleting a layer right there. The other part of it is that you can click and drag. Oh, well, sorry, in Photoshop you can click and drag, but here you can't. And then you type in, and then you go like that. And now if you go to your Move tool, you can now select that and move it around. Okay, and that becomes something you can, sorry, I pressed Control T to see if I could free transform it, but Control T opens a new tab in Chrome. Anyway, so that's basically a lot of the tools you're going to do, and now we will stop the screencast. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.